Scene script: how far can a secret from the past stretch before it snaps back with devastating consequences? Meet Timothy Stephenson, a man who, on the surface, led an enviable life. Nestled in the quiet suburbs east of San Francisco, he lived in a $2 million home with his husband, a respected doctor, and their twin daughters. A picture-perfect existence, one might say. But beneath this facade, Stephenson was harboring a chilling secret. 26 years ago, in the hustle and bustle of Kansas City, a man's life was abruptly ended. The man, a stranger Stephenson had met at a bar, was shot and killed. The crime scene, Stephenson's own home. The case remained unsolved, a cold file gathering dust as Stephenson moved on with his life, carrying with him a secret as dark as the night the crime was committed. Fast forward to 2021. Stephenson's seemingly perfect life began to crumble. His husband had filed for divorce the previous year, and they were locked in a bitter legal battle over the custody of their children. It was during this tumultuous time that the spectre of Stephenson's past finally caught up with him. Authorities arrested him on murder charges, extraditing him to Missouri, and earlier this month, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, earning himself a 16-year sentence behind bars. But what led to this dramatic turn of events? What unraveled this tightly knotted secret from the past? The answer lies in a confession Stephenson made a decade ago. A confession to the one person he thought he could trust, his husband. A confession that would eventually lead to his downfall. A confession that would bring justice to a man who had been denied it for over 2 decades. A confession that would reveal the secret life of Timothy Stephenson. But how did a secret kept for over 2 decades finally see the light of day? A decade-old confession to an estranged husband was the crack in the facade. This confession was not an ordinary one. It was a chilling admission of a heinous crime committed more than 2 decades prior. Timothy Stephenson, a man leading a seemingly enviable life, confessed to his husband, Joseph Gineko, in 2014 that he was a murderer. The victim was Randall Oliphant, a man he had met at a gay bar in Kansas City in the cold month of January 1998. Stephenson chillingly detailed the events of that night, a narrative that would make anyone's blood run cold. He spoke of how they drove to his house in Kansas City, and in the confines of his bathroom he shot Oliphant twice. The first shot wasn't fatal, and Oliphant pleaded for his life. But his pleas fell on deaf ears, and a second shot silenced him forever. But that was just the beginning. Stephenson was not just a killer, he was also a meticulous planner. He knew he had to erase any trace of his crime. So he remodeled the bathroom, a desperate attempt to wipe away the horrifying act that had taken place within its walls. He tried to bury his secret, quite literally, under a veneer of tiles and paint. In 1998, he had even managed to convince the investigators. He admitted to having an unknown male over at his house, but claimed to have dropped him off at another bar later. His phone records did show roaming charges from a cellular tower near where Oliphant's body was eventually discovered in rural Missouri. But the DNA evidence was inconclusive, and Stephenson walked free. Perhaps at that moment he thought he had outsmarted everyone. But he hadn't counted on one thing, his own guilt, which led him to confess to his husband. And he certainly hadn't counted on Joseph Gineko, who, despite waiting a decade, finally brought Stephenson's dark secret to light. But why did Joseph Gineko wait so long before revealing this gut-wrenching secret? The answer to that question might be as complex as the story itself, and is where we will pick up in the next scene. The original investigation in 1998 left more questions than answers. The details of the case were puzzling, and the trail of evidence was shrouded in mystery. Timothy Stephenson had been interviewed by investigators in the same year, admitting to bringing an unknown male back to his home in Kansas City. However, he asserted he had dropped the man off at a different bar later, leaving no strong leads for the authorities to follow. In their quest for the truth, investigators delved into Stephenson's phone records. These records revealed roaming charges from a cellular tower near where the victim's body was found in rural Missouri. This clue was tantalizing, yet it was insufficient in conclusively tying Stephenson to the crime. Then there was the Jeep Wrangler. 4 months after the killing, Stephenson sold his Jeep. The new owner noted that parts of the carpet were missing when he bought it. Upon inspection, the police found traces of blood in the Jeep's rear cargo area. DNA testing was conducted, but the results were inconclusive. The potential piece of damning evidence turned out to be yet another dead end in the investigation. During the investigation, authorities failed to arrest Stephenson. The reasons for this remain unclear to this day. Attempts to seek clarification from the Missouri State Highway Patrol and Benton County Prosecuting Attorney's Office have been met with silence. The absence of comments from these authorities adds another layer of intrigue to this already complex story. As the years passed, the case went cold, with no new leads or evidence to shed light on the grim events of that winter night in 1998. Yet the mystery surrounding the unsolved murder lingered, a silent reminder of justice yet to be served. So, did the police miss something? Or was there more to this story? The twists and turns of this case continued to unravel over the next 2 decades, eventually leading to a shocking revelation that would change everything. By 2021, the past was ready to rear its ugly head. The relationship between Timothy Stephenson and his husband, Joseph Gineyko, had been deteriorating for some time. The once seemingly perfect suburban life had turned into a battleground. Divorce proceedings were underway, and at the heart of it was a custody battle for their twin daughters. However, Gineyko was burdened with a heavy secret, a secret he'd carried for nearly a decade. He knew about the dark act committed by his husband back in 1998. He knew about the man Stephenson had met at a bar, the man he'd shot twice in his own bathroom in Kansas City. He knew about Randy Oliphant, whose life was brutally ended and whose body was found 2 months later, abandoned in the woods. This secret started to weigh heavily on Gineyko, and with the relationship turning sour, he decided it was time for this secret to see the light. He chose to work with investigators to help them gather more evidence, more details about the crime his husband had confessed to him years ago. The undercover operation was carefully planned. Gineyko, now an unlikely ally of the investigators, became their key to unlock the truth about the unsolved murder from 2 decades ago. He played his part meticulously, drawing out crucial information from Stephenson, information that would prove crucial in the ensuing trial. Every conversation, every interaction was part of a larger strategy, a desperate attempt to bring justice to Randy Oliphant and to ensure that Timothy Stephenson paid for his actions. Gineyko's courage and determination were instrumental in this operation, his resolve unwavering in the face of an unimaginable situation. The operation was a risky one, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But it was a risk Gineyko was willing to take, a risk that would ultimately pay off. The information he gathered, the evidence he helped collect, was the missing puzzle piece that investigators needed to finally close the case. And so, the unraveling of Timothy Stephenson's secret life began. In the end, the weight of the past proved too heavy. For Timothy Stephenson, a man who had successfully kept a dark secret for over 20 years, the walls of his life began to close in during December of 2021. The once enviable life he enjoyed in a $2 million home in suburban San Francisco was abruptly replaced by the cold, stark reality of handcuffs and a police car. Arrested on charges of murder, Stephenson found himself pulled from the sunny climes of California and extradited to the heartland of America, the state of Missouri, where his past had been waiting patiently to catch up with him. The crime, committed in the late 90s, had remained a mystery for almost 2 decades. But in 2021, the puzzle pieces began to fall into place, and Stephenson, once a face in a crowd, became the face of a cold case turned hot. The man he had met in a bar in Kansas City all those years ago, Randall Oliphant, would finally get justice. In the courtroom, Timothy Stephenson was no longer the successful man married to a doctor, but a defendant facing serious charges. He stood before the court, the gravity of his actions hanging in the air, and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. The judge, in turn, sentenced him to 16 years in a Missouri state prison. The sentence was a stark contrast to the life he had led, a life of comfort and privilege. It was a life built on a secret, a life that began to unravel when he confessed his crime to his husband a decade earlier. His words, intended to be shared in confidence, ultimately became the key to unlocking the truth about a crime committed 26 years ago. And thus, a secret kept for over 2 decades led to a downfall that was decades in the making. In the end, the The truth caught up with Timothy Stephenson, and the weight of his past, once hidden, became too heavy to bear.